Hi, everyone. Welcome along to the latest piece of Services Delivery Alliance content. I'm delighted to be joined today by Phil Davitt, SVP of Professional Services from Eptura. How are you, sir?
Very good. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you for having me back to talk to you again.
Oh, well, you were one of the original podcast guests many, many years ago and a
Indeed.
strong supporter of the services community. So always delighted to have you on. Give us a little bit of an introduction to yourself, the scope of your current role, and a bit about your career, and then we'll get into some of the content.
Yeah, sure. As you mentioned, Senior Vice President of Global Professional Services. I'm at a company called Eptura, which was founded in 2022. It is the bringing together of 9 different companies, which all had very specific solutions in the work tech industry. Eptura, the name means epicenter of the future of work tech. So the intention is to be able to provide systems and solutions for anything that somebody might need regarding their workspace and their technology in a workspace. So whether that is space optimization, which would be very popular right now with people kind of upping and downing the sizes of their spaces, reservation management for rooms, desks, parking, lockers, visitor management, making a nice easy process for people to come see you, and asset management, which is planned maintenance, controls, and kind of service requests for things that are broken. So that's a lot of various different things, all under kind of one unified platform, unified experience. And as I said, these were 9 companies that came together under the umbrella of private equity, which is why we're going to talk about that in a little bit. My role is to create, design, and deploy the services strategy in alignment with what our partners and business partners in the C-suite, but also our board require of us. So I kind of take their requirements and translate them into actionable initiatives, things that we can actually deliver over short, medium, long term. My background, I've been CCO, SVP, VP of various CX organizations, whether that's the whole of customer experience, customer success, professional services at various different companies. But yeah, right now we are a PE-backed company, which means kind of helping the teams from 9 different businesses transition from being either owned by their founders and their owners or VC-backed into the more governance-led and kind of the tried and tested path of private equity.
Cool. Very cool. Interesting. I love the name. Interesting. It's like an interesting fact, isn't it? The name,
Yeah.
as well as your we must be slightly similar ages because you've got a Thundercats sword behind you, which I've just clocked. Um,
I, I built the background for exactly that purpose to see what people go for. You are only the second person to have clocked the Thundercats theme.
I've got the Thundercats movie on VHS still.
Very
That's
cool.
that's that's tape. For anyone the younger generation, this is when you used to watch things on a tape, not on a even a DVD or
DVD.
online.
Yeah.
Amazing. I love it. So I think today one of the things we're going to go through, you were very kind to come into one of the London events recently, and this presentation was really well received. So we thought we'd sort of package the content. So we're going to be talking, everyone, about the difference in running services inside of a VC-backed company to running it inside of a private equity company. And for those of you, I think maybe operating in the software or SaaS industry, the rise of private equity in that industry has been pretty significant over the last 5 years. They're probably one of the most active investors types now in our industry, and they have a certain way of doing things. So I think learning from Phil, your experience, Phil, will be great. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen. We're going to talk through some of this now, and then I'll be asking some questions as we go through. So let's crack on.
Just whilst you do, and you're bringing that up, just a
Hmm.
great session in London the other week. Absolutely packed. Standing room only, I think, by the end.
Yeah, exactly.
Really, really
Well,
popular
a,
sessions.
a lack of industry help is being remedied, I think. So that's what we're all about. So we came up with this pithy title. the business within a business. So let's get into it really. So to begin with, actually we took some of Rob Niehaus from iSIMS, who articulated this previously in an SDA webinar about the different growth phases, and we'd overlaid some of your insight into it. So talk us through this to begin with.
So I remember my very first foray into SaaS, working with a company called New Voice Media, which went through their growth journey. That was VC backed. And very, very quickly, I learned that the PS organization was there to deliver on ARR. You know, our kind of mantra was do what you need to do. If you need to get on an airplane and fly to another country to spend time with a customer tomorrow, you do that. You're not worried about a P&L. You're not worried about services kind of making a profit. And nobody's really looking at the costs of that, because you're a cost center that is there to deliver on something else. So the services was viewed as a necessity. We have to be there to get people up and running on the platform, but it was viewed the same as, you know, often support organizations are, or infrastructure teams, kind of cloud operational teams. It's just something we have to have so that the other part of the business, the commercial part of the business, can run. So it's underlying cost. And as the business grows, you start to move from that services as a necessity, where a lot of the time, as we've got on the slide, it's given away for free. You do try to sell it where possible, but there's no real management of that. There's no real quota for the sales teams to do. Discount is all over the place. You start to grow, and as your services department starts to find its feet as a customer differentiator. So now people are saying, you're not just buying our software as a service, which needs to be implemented. You're buying our software and you're getting a service with it. So the wrapper of delivery and professional services starts to be something that you might present in the sales conversations, right? It's no longer just about saying, hey, here's our product and we'll deliver it for you. It's here's our product and here's our delivery organization. Here is how we are different from other companies. We will help you and we will handhold you through that process. And it's around that time that the finance team tend to kind of look and say, we'd like to stop you losing money. We just want you to cover your costs. And if you can break even, that would be great. As we moved into private equity and the business I'm in now, which is private equity, services is very clearly looked at as a revenue driver for the business. So we have to make a bit of margin on the services, which means we have to look at how we grow various different parts of our services organization, new offerings and things like that. So we've gone from giving it away to just about covering our costs, and now we have to make a margin on it. And that's kind of really kind of tied to those various different stages of the SaaS company growth.
Cool. Funny story on your story. So I think we met originally at Dreamforce way back when, after New Voice Media had been sold to Vonage. And you came to a talk that I did with Mark Fellows,
Yeah.
right? And part of what I was talking about was reimagining like client onboarding as a mechanism to unlock additional ARR. And you guys came up to me afterwards, were like, that thing you're talking about is pretty hot at the moment in our business, because the business had been sold, the bookings were like this, but the revenue was like this. Because in that model, I think the ARR was activated at go live, right? So any kind of delay meant that you weren't sort of processing the ARR quickly enough. And I remember being sort of taken to meet the CEO of Vonage, Alan, maybe it was, super tall guy, right?
Yep.
Back then, who was like, yeah, we were talking about this at board level, right? That services engine needs to be very efficient. Now they were public, they weren't private at that time, but I think the principle is the same, right? It's like part of what we're going to talk about is like the importance of understanding the mechanics, right? In these different models, and the spatial awareness around that as a services leader. So we've got this kind of the two contrasts here. So you've worked in both worlds. So kind of similar but different. Discuss.
So some of this comes from a great blog by Dave Kellogg, who does a lot of SaaS
Yeah.
analysis, and he did one. It's a little while back. I'm sure you can find it with a quick Google on not just PS but overall the difference in a SaaS organization from being VC and PE. And the reason we called this business within a business is that PS kind of is a distilled version of what is happening in the wider organization. I think a lot of departments will probably feel the same way, but yeah, PS is just it's a mini version of the same thing that the company is going through as a whole. So whilst you've gone from doing whatever it takes, you have to win the market. A great kind of phrase that we saw in that VC world was you sell it now and you apologize later, right? Just get the deal and then we'll deal with the fallout afterwards. But actually, in the PE world, we're now looking at rigor across the whole organization. We should only be selling stuff that we've got to sell, things that are on the wagon, rather than going out and just trying to win the business from somebody else. We're far more focused on that ideal customer profile that customer success and experience talks about a lot. And that's because it's not just about the booking anymore. It's about getting that customer, actually checking the cost of acquisition, checking the lifetime value of the customer. Huge amount of focus on churn rates, growth rates, the stuff that happens later on in life. And so by just winning a deal that's maybe not the ideal fit for the business, that can be a lot of distraction for all the teams, professional services, customer success, support, development, product. Because we spend all of our time trying to satisfy this one customer that maybe bought something a bit unusual, rather than focusing on delivering great and continued experiences, at scale for everybody else.
Yeah.
Within that VC world, you've got profits being sacrificed historically just for growth. One of the metrics that we talk about later is that rule of 40, where you want to hit a 40% EBITDA plus growth number, but the focus was all on growth. So you'd actually turn around and say, well, look, we're going to grow at 60%. We can have minus 20% profits as long as we're growing and growing and growing.
Yeah.
Moving into the private equity space, whilst the focus might still be on that rule of 40, a lot more of it is now focused on profitability by having a business that is controlled. So
Yeah.
there is rigor right the way across from how we're marketing, selling, delivering, supporting, focused on kind of all the metrics at all different points.
Mm.
Because quite often, the private equity companies, they are in there, similar to VCs, but they are aiming for an exit that they can almost guarantee. Whereas VC backed might back 10 companies
Yeah.
looking for one unicorn.
Yeah.
They are a lot more able to be flexible in how you run your business, try a lot of things and see what works. You move into private equity, actually, they want 10 for 10. If they're backing 10 companies, they want 10 strategic exits, IPOs, or sales to other PEs that are going to provide them their profit. And so rather than kind of experimenting with a lot of things that you might do when you're a smaller company, you actually gain the value of having business partners around the private equity that have done this time and time again with lots of other companies, similar industries, similar sizes of businesses. So they have their playbooks that they come in and they say, great, here is how we've seen success before. Focus on this, deliver on this, build like that. And so you get all that value from the experience of your PE partners. And usually they will have a specific playbook or a way that they want to do things. Now, all PE is different. It's not one company is going to have a slightly different model from another, hands-on, hands-off, kind of guided to this or letting you be a bit more flexible to that. I spoke to a bunch of people after we did this presentation last week who kind of said, it's not exactly how my PE does things. Some of the bits made sense and some of the bits are a little bit different. So moving from the flexibility of VC, try it, see what works, but focus on win-win-win, to doing repeated kind of plays that these equity partners have seen success in before. And as I said, rather than just focus on win the business, get the deal, we're now looking at retention rates, gross and net, upsells, cross sells, cross product sales, renewal, that whole suite of metrics across the whole customer lifetime.
Well, so to that point about like we're backed by private equity and maybe I don't see some of these things. There's a huge difference in the level of interest and sophistication in investors depending on the type of private equity fund or company that you're working with, right? Because um there's a massive difference between being invested in by Thoma Bravo, right, or Vista, right, versus a private equity fund who's making their first foray into SaaS, for example, right, who doesn't like knows they want to be in SaaS but doesn't really understand the mechanics of SaaS and all of the above. But I guess a question that I have on this is, where would you rather work as a services leader?
So it's a great question,
Yeah,
because one of the future slides we're going to talk about is the team that you have around you as a services leader, whether that's whoever runs services, and in our case, that'll be me, the leader of the whole customer department, the CX teams, or directors, team leaders, members of the team that are doing delivery. And there is a significant difference in what people like and how people like to work. And so quite often you will find the team that you've got when you are VC backed, it's not necessarily the same team that you need when you're in a PE organization.
mm,
And we saw a lot of that actually as we went from being VC to PE, where people came and said, actually, this isn't the right stage company for me. I
yeah,
prefer XYZ.
yeah,
The same thing was true at New Voice Media when we'd kind of moved, as we said, to being owned by Vonage, which was a strategic buyer. They took us from VC to being strategically
yeah,
owned, and Vonage was publicly owned. And I was out looking and hiring for a director of professional services, and met a couple of people that kind of looked like great services leaders. They'd been there, they'd done that, and they came in with lots of new ideas, but kind of said, I would rather go to a seed level company, that's going through their seed funding, or maybe a Series A, Series B, because I like to do lots of different things. I like to be the one person that needs to do this.
yeah,
Whereas, a great example that we used was that at New Voice Media, someone would come to me and say, we need to start doing a survey for our customers. And so I would go to somebody and say, right, at the side of your desk, figure that out. How are we going to survey
yeah,
customers? How are we going to do this? When we got to Vonage, someone came to me and said, oh, are you surveying customers? I said, yeah, we do that for the services. Like, great. We've got our customer surveys team. And it's a whole team of people, and their entire job is to just manage the surveys that go out, because it's going out when you speak to support, it's going out after you've bought the
yeah,
thing, going out at various different stages. So there's three people. And if
yeah,
you
yeah,
want to survey customers, you have to go and put your item in a queue with this team.
yeah,
And some people really thrive in that environment. Great, I've got structure. It's very clear. I've got a framework. If I want to do something, I've got a model that says fill in this form, do this, this, and this.
yeah,
Other people feel constricted. They say, no, I don't want people to tell me, yes, I can, no, I can't.
mm,
So the question of where would you rather be is very dependent on whether you like starting a project with a blank piece of paper and saying, I can do whatever I want,
mm,
whether you like to
yeah,
start a project with, here is how projects within this business are run. You do X, Y, Z, and you have
yeah.
that framework to guide you.
So here's a couple of comments from my side. On the left, the VC-backed companies, the tenure of the services leaders, in my experience, is much lower, right? So we worked with a lot of these companies over 2021, 2022. And by 2022, a lot of those services leaders were gone, or the departments were blown up and reorganized, and because they couldn't figure out what they wanted services to be. Because you had this kind of mix of this paradox of, like, yeah, drive ARR, be salesy, versus, I'm trying to manage this team of people who are just constantly on the red line, and under the cosh, which is pretty challenging. Um, and I think this fiscal discipline kind of suits certain people well, right? If you're that way, sort of, if you work that way to begin with, then I think private equities, I would say more diverse for learning business skills that are really valuable to a services leader that can translate into like general management positions, um, CCO type career path, right? And things of that ilk. But super interesting. So um seems to be a little bit of selling in this one, Phil.
Well, it's again, it's business within a business.
Yeah,
So, you know, I lead professional services. I run a business. Like you
yeah,
said, that's a great set of kind of business leadership skills. It's not just about running a team that delivers SaaS, right? It is managing that business within a business. So we have to be able to contribute to the growth of the overall private equity company. And one of the elements of the whole private equity, again, this is an example of PS being just a distilled version of what you're doing across the whole business, is that you have to grow what you're selling. And that comes usually within three categories. It's selling more of the same,
yeah,
it's selling the same, for an increased value, and it's selling different things.
yeah,
That is true at a business level. You're going to find ways to sell more of the same product. So whether that's geographically, we're selling the same solutions for the same price, but to a wider audience, whether that is taking what you've got and increasing the value that customers can get from it, adding different things into your license packaging so that you can add a more premium level license or service, or if it's kind of diversifying in your product. And professional services can do exactly the same thing. So you want to be able to sell more of the same thing. So whether that is attaching more PS to new deals or finding opportunities where customers might not have used the professional services team, but could if you were to position it right.
yeah,
There is, I guess, controls and governance on the value of professional services. That's one of those differences from when you go from early stage through to this, that professional services was always that the discounting was fairly loose. You'd start with your list price, but you would discount it down, 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 down. By putting more controls and governance around that, you can defend the value of it.
mm,
A lot of the PS leaders within my team spend a huge amount of their time kind of on the pre-sale side of the professional services journey, which is helping customers understand, here is the value that you'll get from this delivery. Here is why it's worth what we're kind of putting in this quote. And what we see is those engagements result in less discount being requested and added. So we're
yeah,
selling more of it and we're retaining a higher price. But then we also look at selling more things, which means that we provide more offering to our customers. Previously, we would only do XYZ. We're now adding additional things. You can also buy ABC, whether that is managed services packages, premium support packages, whether that is consulting time, over and above what it is that we would usually just do to deliver. Here is your product. We have built it for you and hand it over. We
mhm,
say, great, would you like us to run a project? We can add a project management layer. Would you like to have consulting and workshops to change how your business is running rather than just delivering a solution
yeah,
and deliver business change? And so we focus on kind of all three of these elements, which allows PS as an organization to go from we just do one thing and it's fairly discounted to we do a lot of things, we're doing more of them, and the discounting is more controlled.
yeah. I think in this world that there's a few things, right? It's really important to have alignment with the commercial organization at all different levels. And that's from CRO, VP sales, regional sales leaders, sales managers, and AEs all the way down. And the challenge with that, if you've got multiple business units, is the number of people, the different regions. It's the turnover of staff, right? So if you're in a business for 3 years, you might see 10, 20% I was talking to one company the other day, like 30% of their sales team changes
Wow.
every year, right? So there's a huge amount of like enablement and re-enablement that has to happen. And I think actually, I mean, you worked in some bigger businesses where sales enablement was a really big function and like you had lots of people. You don't always have that in like mid-market software companies, right? You
Right.
might have a RevOps person. So how you embed that into the onboarding journey of the commercial team so that like you're not trying to clean up the messes afterwards is really important. And I also think like you've got to have that board level investor backing on look sales. This is our pricing, this is our discounting policy, and anything under that is genuinely is like that's an escalation, and that's the type of business that we're in, guys. And you typically also tend to find that depending on the commercial leader, you'll have a better time of it than if you don't, right? If you've got a really mature worldly CRO that understands the value of services and actually why throwing discounts at PS isn't the way to get deals over the line. It's actually the opposite, in many ways. All of those factors. I see you nodding along. I'm guessing you've come up against some of those challenges.
Yeah, the pricing is a really interesting one because the sales team will quite often view me as kind of the gatekeeper for the pricing. So they'll come and say, Phil, I'm going to need this discount. I need to sell it at this rate, or why is it priced like this? And I say, it's not me in isolation making the decision on how we price it. Right? We've got the CRO in those meetings when we're deciding what the price is. We've got the CEO, and quite often members of the board will be part of the decision of how we price when we're
Yeah,
deciding here is a new product that we're doing, and this is the price of it. So when a rep comes and says, that doesn't work in my industry, I need you to change that price. I need you to agree me to get discounts. So, that's not PS enforcing a pricing on sales. That is the whole business deciding this is the value of what we're selling. And so that's why when you've got that experienced CRO, which we do, and a great partnership with that CRO,
yeah,
it means that you're not having, I guess, a battle on
yeah,
pricing.
yeah. No, it's cool. PE organizational capability spelt the English way. Apologies to my cousins. We were just having a laugh on this earlier. So something that we talked about at the meeting is, and again, it's a phrase that I like to use, is like this kind of spatial awareness, right? And that what I mean by that is when you're running a business within a business, there's a number of different lenses, right? There's the industry that you're operating in, there's the company that you're working in. So that industry might have certain regulatory or industry dynamics that influences the way the service is going to operate. You've got the business itself, like are you, as some of our clients are at the moment, they're on the path to IPO. So they're actually VC backed, but behaving much more like PE in the lead up to IPO, right? Which is interesting for them. They've gone from it's all right to lose money to give me 20% EBITDA. And so there's this kind of organizational piece and also like an individual piece, which I think is kind of really interlinked. So I think what something I've observed about you over the years, and please take this the right way, is you really leaned into the commercial mindset. I don't think you liked it like when I met you, how many years ago it was, right? But I think you've really embraced it, and become a lot more of a commercial leader. And this is why this is kind of like number one, right, on your points here on the left.
It is. Around the time when we first met, I was working for a great leader, a guy called Chris Haggis, who is
Yeah, yeah,
he's a chief operating officer, chief customer officer in
yeah,
various companies. And I remember having a conversation with him where I was kind of saying, I need more people for X, Y, Z. And he came up with some great analogies around, I think the exact words were, you came to me 2 months ago asking for a bunch of sweets. You haven't finished the sweets that I gave you there, and you're coming and you're asking me for more sweets now. And I just always remember that analogy of it being just so simplified. You've asked me for this, you've not used it and taken advantage of it yet, and you're now coming and asking for more. And me kind of walking away from that with the exact kind of gap that we're identifying there, that commercial acumen, knowing what drives your business and understanding not just I am in this team, I am in this department, and this is what I need, to actually understanding that, the whole business has a P&L, right? I can go and I can demonstrate. If you give me 10 million, I can bring you 15 million. But if the business doesn't have 10 million in its plan to put into that goal, then it's unlikely to happen. And so you're absolutely right. I fully kind of lent into that. And when we were talking earlier, and you kind of said that actually kind of commercially minded managers who have an idea of I just want to say kind of their hands on the purse strings can quite often thrive in those bigger companies. I smile because I suspect any of my team that are watching this will be nodding along and saying, "Oh yeah, Phil's always talking about hands on the purse strings and control
Yep.
over spend," and that actually a huge amount of our decisions will come down to this commercial side of things. So we will always try and balance out how do we have happy employees, which we know drives happy customers and satisfaction, with the underscoring of running an efficient and effective business, which is driving revenue. And
Mm.
so all of those have to be balanced, which is why we have these, in the leadership skills, commercial acumen, you need that right the way across your whole team at this scale and size. I have team managers within my various teams that will come and say, I need more people for reason X, Y, Z. And I will always go into the numbers of utilization, efficiency,
Yep.
margin for particular departments to say, you need to look at those numbers. You need to become more operationally efficient before we can look at additional headcount and staffing, which is quite often a challenge because they are always feeling overworked. They are often feeling like I could do with resource.
Mm.
But then if I go to any department in our business, not just PS, but any department and say, could you do with more resource? Like, yeah, absolutely. And if everybody gets those sweets without controls around it, then suddenly you're not making any margin across the whole business
Yep.
because everybody needs that little bit more.
Yep.
From a leadership perspective, as we talked about earlier, that the skills can quite often be a bit different. And whilst directors, senior directors, leaders, even, might not necessarily be communicating directly with the board, there is always that lens that we kind of ask in how they think. So, as an example, I've got my directors and senior directors, this month working on our 2025 budget planning. And
Mhm.
so, everything that they are doing, we have to always have that lens of, okay, and now how are we going to take that and present that information to the board?
Yep.
Let's not look at it at the level of here is what I need just for my team, but how do we present that information? And so they're always trying to change their thinking. And obviously that is very useful for them as development as well, which is in the next role, when you have to work with a board yourself directly, how would you do that? And
Clarity of message, data, right? And then knowing what question we're going to get asked off the back of that data.
I remember years ago going through kind of training of this of how to present to executives, and it's always you have to say more kind of by saying less.
Yeah.
The old adage of, I would have written you a shorter letter, but I didn't have the time. Write everything out and then focus it, distill it, remove anything that's unnecessary for the message so that the message gets across in 3 bullet points. Bang, bang, bang. But then when they ask you the questions, well, under that bullet point, you've said this. Have you thought about the 3 underlying points of A, B, and C? Yes, I have. Here is the answer to A, B, and C.
Yeah.
Excellent. What if we change A, B, or C? Well, that changes the high level number like this, like this, like this, which we have modeled somewhere else. So
Yeah.
you have to have a huge amount of data and knowledge rolled up into as short a presentation and kind of couple of bullet points as you can, but you need to know everything downstream to be able to support the conversation.
Yeah. You also have to like afford yourself the time to do that, right? Like you have to set up your internal cadences to spend time thinking about the business as much as working on the business, right? And I think too often we're working on the business and we don't pull up to like think about it, and do that strategy piece, do that scenario piece. We have got two Z's. We have got a Z and an S on this page, by the way. I've just noticed that.
Just to mix it up.
Yeah.
That's probably because I wrote that bullet point list, and I'm
Yeah,
so
yeah,
used to working with the American teams now that I
yeah,
do move towards using the S. I've heard that phrase before. There's working in the business and there's working on the business. Working in the business is doing the stuff day to day. Working on the business is improving that. You're kind of you step outside. It's not driving the car. You step outside and it's tinkering with, it's improving, and it's making
yeah,
changes to. The analogy falls short on the fact that, you know, the car that we have in this scenario is going 100 miles an hour down a motorway. So
yeah.
whilst you do have to be in the car driving it and controlling it, you also have to be on the outside of the car trying to tinker on the engine whilst it's flying down the motorway very,
It's
very.
cyclical as well, right? In my business, first half was in the business, very much so, because we'd done a lot on the business in the last 6 months of last year. And then coming up for air and redoing our strategy, we used the GOSPA framework for strategy and execution. And then it was clear that we needed to do some work on the business. I think with regards to the funding your growth, talk us through, this links to the point around selling more things.
Yeah.
I think often packaging of services is kind of, there's two lenses to it. One is through the shop window, like we need to be able to offer something to clients, right? And then another lens to it is, right, well, it's additional revenue streams. So kind of how do you think about the importance of being able to fund your own growth, and then the link to the positive gross margins, which that also inflects?
When we brought all these companies together, I came from one of the heritage businesses that had one SKU for professional services. That was a professional services hour.
Yeah,
You just buy a multiple of that. You want a very large project, you're going to buy a large multiple of that. You want a very short delivery, it's a short multiple. But every single interaction that way then had to be custom scoped, which takes a long time, right? That you might have, okay, we've got an idea that small projects look like this, medium projects look like this, but every single interaction needed time and attention on packaging it together. When we look at some of the other heritage businesses, 4, 5, 6, 700 SKUs at times, where every single thing you could buy would have its own SKU. So you would buy a kickoff meeting, you would buy a training session, and then a project would be built out of these blocks.
yeah,
We want to be able to sell this at scale whilst maintaining a level of flexibility. So we kind of now have reduced down, but we have a combination of them. So you will buy a delivery. And so we package together the most often used small, medium, and large deliveries. That makes it nice and easy for our sales team, who can quickly say to a customer that if you're going to go with one of our packages, based on the size that you're buying in terms of ARR, it's going to be package B, and that looks like this. If you would like something more custom, then we can bring the teams in to customize it. And so we went through a huge process of consolidating our SKUs, getting control over them, allowing us to then enable the teams and the sales team, like you talked about, the importance of very close alignment with the enablement of our partners in sales. We enabled them on, these are all the new things that you can sell. And that then makes it easier when we start coming out with new things, because the sales team know if I'm selling this product, I'm going to sell package 1, package 2, or package 3. If we need to make a change to one of those packages, we make a change to the package, and we can enable that out and say, package 3 is now even cheaper, or package 3 now includes this add-on that 90% of customers have asked for, so it's now included in the package. So our professional services go-to-market process is a lot quicker to change and to enable the teams, which allows us to increase the offerings, but
Yep.
not have to increase the complexity of doing that. So we're remaining efficient whilst increasing what the teams are able to sell, which I think was really important. And it drives the second point on positive gross margins for professional services as well as the overall business. When we sell something, we know that we're going to be able to scrape a margin out of that rather than, again, having to calculate it on every single deal. How do we think we're going to manage to make some money on this? And then touching on the last point around what I call the closed loop data means that what we're selling and scoping translates directly into what we're doing and we're delivering, which
Yep.
translates directly into what we're recognizing in revenue and we've done and we
Yep.
close off. I always feel strange, and I said this when we met with the big group people. I feel strange talking about this because it seems so obvious. Yes, what you sell is what you deliver. What you deliver drives the revenue that you recognize. And the revenue that you recognize then becomes kind of the closed project, and you can report on it at every stage of the way.
Yep.
But so many VC companies that I've talked to don't operate like that, right?
Yep.
I've sold something, and there is very little connection and correlation between what I've sold to the project.
Yeah.
And then there's very little kind of consolidation from the project and the work we're doing to the revenue.
Yeah.
And then when we finish the project, we don't really look back and kind of connect the dots and say, well, we sold this much, we did this much, we recognize this much. Here is how we are in terms of efficiency and profitability. But you
Yeah.
need to have that system, like I said, kind of a closed loop system that says, well, I should be able to look at the end of my project and see what did I sell, what did we do at every stage, where we ran over, we ran under, how it translated to revenue,
Mm.
the controls across the whole part of that journey.
There's a couple of things on that, and also have a question. So one is one, and this is really a thought on like kind of why you look at it that way, and I guess why I look at it that way as well, because we're private equity backed. Is we've always been looking at the data in the same place, right? In our customer platform, in both our cases, Salesforce, and we have done for many years. So we're also kind of used to that, right? Like looking at that, seeing that customer journey, both from like a client engagement perspective, but then also like following the revenue through as well, right? Like you just get used to having a more holistic view of things rather than this is over here, this is over here, this is over here, which also lends itself to gaming things, right? Where, someone's playing around with a spreadsheet and says, oh, I'd like to take that deal and allocate X to software and X to PS to make everyone whole again, which it's harder to do if it's all in the same place. One question I have on this is one question that comes up a lot from the community is how often do you iterate offerings and packaging? Do you tend to do that once a year, twice a year? What
Um,
sort of iteration cycle have you found kind of has worked best for you? I know it's not a
so
one size fits all.
we did a great big review early on. As I mentioned, Eptura was founded kind of towards the end of 2022, October 2022. And by January of 23, so 2 and a bit months later, is when we did our first big change because various different kind of heritage companies all doing things differently. So
Yeah,
we kind of came together under the one model of we have packages, we have add-ons, and then we have custom SKUs where you need an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. That big thing happened then. But then as we have carried on with that journey, we have then had time to look at and say, great, now let's look at product A specifically. We've got these three packages. Are they working for our customers? Are they working for us as a business? Are they giving the team what they need to be able to be successful in their deployment? And great, we now need to make changes to package A, B, and C for product number one. And so that's kind of is an ongoing process, but it's probably a change maybe every 4 or 5 months. We're coming in and saying, great, one of our product list of SKUs is going to change like this. One of the operational efficiency things was about having program management office within PS, resource management office. We've wrapped that up in what the team that we call our Center of Excellence.
Right.
And they are there to make sure everything that gets done globally across PS is done with best practice in mind, but is done consistently. And so we're very fortunate that that team also looks after our SKU planning, our packaging planning. So they take those to our pricing committee and say, we've made changes, because what we found is people always buy package C with
Yeah.
add-on 1, 2, and 3. So we're going to add them in. We're going to put those into the package. It's going to change the package
Yeah.
price like this. But that
Yeah.
hopefully makes it easier for our sales teams to know I don't have to keep adding these bits on.
Yeah. Yeah, I think my comment on that always is like, if you compare your ratio of products that you sell to services SKUs that you sell, typically services SKUs is always higher. And so you're dealing with a situation where you want to have it as simple as possible, and therefore iteration needs to be within reason, because otherwise no one's going to keep up. Two more
Yeah.
points then. So so the metrics that matter. Obviously folks can read, so we've had this up on the screen for a little bit here, so hopefully they can see what it means, how to influence it. What's your overall kind of commentary here on these metrics?
So first two, services margin is very specific to services, obviously,
Yep.
but it is probably the key metric that, I guess, from our private equity journey that we really want to focus on, which is, are we being efficient, and are we actually kind of covering our cost base plus?
Yep.
And all the other metrics can drive into that. That's where we talk about, that's that one bullet point that says, here's what our services margin is going to be, but we need to know all the various things that deliver into that. And it relates incredibly closely with that rule of 40, which is a business-wide metric.
Mm-hmm.
Elements that drive that might be the hourly rates, whether that's achieved or sold.
Yep.
That allows us to kind of break down to every hour of work that we do on projects, how much revenue does that deliver? And so that allows us to kind of track efficiency, kind of quite a granular level, whereas gross margin is, that quite macro look. How much did we deliver across the year in revenue, and how much did it cost to run the team? But we're
Yep.
looking then individually at how much did we deliver on this project in terms of hours, and how much did we deliver in terms of revenue. And so we've got both ends of that scale that we are looking at. And then the last ones, you and I discussed this in detail about making sure we add this in,
Mm.
is that professional services does drive other metrics across the business. ARR, professional services does help close deals and increase the value of deals. We can demonstrate that. Service leaders out there can demonstrate that. So
Yep.
we're able to celebrate that professional services is driving ARR for the business. Gross retention and net retention, again, customers that use more professional services renew at a higher rate. Customers that have professional services managed service packages buy and cross-sell at a higher rate. So
Mm.
professional services is driving additional revenue, both in terms of renewal and upsell. Now,
Yep.
I'm not taking full credit for those numbers, because it's our sales colleagues that drive ARR. It's our renewals team that are driving the gross retention. It's our customer service and customer success teams that are driving the net retention and the growth. But professional services has a hand in helping push all of those along a little bit.
Mm. So I have a question on this. It's something that I've been looking at in the context of a lot of businesses increasingly looking to augment their services capacity and capability with partners, which is not an uncommon part of the overall kind of growth journey, where you've got, and just to be clear, I'm talking about third-party services partners, not resellers, not channel partners. One of the things that I remember you and I talking about a story years ago where, well, it wasn't a story, it was where there was some blending of services and product, right? And therefore services getting no credit for the revenue, the services revenue, because it was all wrapped up in the one fee. And so the horse trading around that in terms of the credit and the recognition. Something that I've also been looking at is, in this shift towards partners, companies are looking at kind of like, well, how do we best enable those partners? So for example, partner enablement, partner operations, partner co-selling, these types of things, which often can sit in services to begin with, right? You're given the task, like go figure out partners. But one thing that I've been thinking about, and it links to services gross margin, is like there's certain roles there that really shouldn't be in PS. They should be a G&A cost or sales cost, right? So they come off your cost of sale, right? They come off your services gross margin. So they improve your services gross margin. They actually improve your company gross profit, depending, right, like on the level of cost. Like it might be a percentage point. Is that something that you, as a part of the private equity stuff, that you'd ever sort of talked about? Is how best do we organize some of these costs? Does that question make sense?
It does, yeah, absolutely. Had a conversation about that exact point yesterday,
Oh,
where
really?
we we are introducing some very specific new kind of offerings, and those I think are going to be very exciting for our customers. But some of them require a bit of services to deliver, and the question is, do we want to be charging for those deliveries, or do we want to be using them as an enabler for ARR, right?
Yeah,
Which is or churn mitigation.
yeah,
And so, yeah, if a customer comes around and says, "Great, I use this and this, but I don't use this one," we're like, "No problem. Well, why don't you swap that for this, which we know is very cool and you're definitely going to want?" And they're like, "Yeah, great, cool, swap it." And the question comes down to, should we be charging
charge.
for that
Yeah,
delivery or not? And if we decide not to, how do you bucket that? How do you
yeah,
report it? Because
yeah, get it.
again, the services team, I need to be able to demonstrate the success of their value, which is one of the reasons why you've got service margin at a gross and then the hourly rates achieved, because you can demonstrate and kind of connect. Well, my service margins are dropping overall because I've got this team over here doing that. But if I look at just the work that we do for our customers, I can demonstrate that we are making a margin because it costs me X to run this project and I make Y revenue on that project. So when I'm working on paid for projects, we're doing this, but in a separate bucket, we're doing all of this other stuff for free or a discount rate or whatever it might be. And so then you can get into conversations. And something that we did last year is we actually created within PS sub P&Ls.
Yeah,
So we've got, here's the P&L for team A and here's the P&L for team
yeah.
B. We report it at the combined level, professional
So yeah,
services.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
But I can report margin of that group versus
yeah,
margin of that group, and that group do additional things. And so
yeah,
whilst overall P&L might not be where we want it to be, we're like, well, actually, when you look at this one individual group that does paid for projects, P&L's great.
mm,
When we look at that other side where the whole business agrees that's the right thing to do,
mm.
P&L looks slightly different.
That's an interesting one. The previous point around like for migrations where you're like migrating customers from one product to another product, and where would you put that cost? Because you could almost have a SWAT team that you put in like CS, for example, that are
Yeah.
technical. So they're like TAMs that they do that. You don't charge for it, but it's not on your services cost line. It's not in your services gross margin, but it's going to be driving retention and growth. Um, I guess it'd be interesting to know who wouldn't be happy about that. But anyway,
I'm guessing the
cool.
CS team, who's now taking that cost on their budget.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, depends if they're like the CCO owns it both, right? They might be like,
Yeah.
yeah, let's do that. Cool. Thank you. Really useful. Thank you, sir. Thank you for prepping. So, key takeaways here. We've outlined some things. What's your kind of final thoughts, as it were? What would be the things to for others to keep in mind if they're operating in this space?
Uh, the key element, it's a business within a business.
Yep.
So a PS leader has to have that business mindset of, I am running a business. Need to think about all the various different bits. Pricing, marketing of PS, the selling of PS, yes, the delivery of our service, the ongoing management of it, and how do I run a successful business from a P&L perspective? So it's quite often a very big change for PS leaders who may have previously just focused on, I just need to run projects,
Yeah.
which then means, yeah, finding additional ways to drive revenue. The team have to be able to look at pulling more out of what you've got, which then means getting creative. You mentioned earlier about partners and enabling partners. It's a great revenue stream. If you've got people that you're saying, hey, look, we could pass you deals to do and projects to do, but if you want that, you're going to need to become certified. Hey, we have this paid for certification process. We will train you, you will get a badge, and then you can go off and you can do your own delivery work. And so you kind of create an ecosystem of partners that can sometimes sell direct, sometimes take work through you. So it's additional things that you find to sell.
Mm.
And as a leader in a PS organization, from team leader, team manager upwards, you need to first of all know that that's the right way that you want to work. You want to be in that structured thing. You know, the intensity in PE, I have found far more than it was in VC. And so,
Yeah.
whilst a lot of people are like, great, I work in startups and it's a constant energy, it's a constant job. Actually, PE, I found, kind of takes that up another level.
Yeah.
You need to be surrounded by the people on your team and your partners that are happy to be in there. And then I finish off the takeaways again with the commercial mindset. You talked about it earlier. There's a lot of talk of selling, and it's because professional services has gone from being just a delivery mechanism. We go back to that first slide. We're going to give it away for free, just get it done. That is one way of doing professional services. To right now, we need to think about the costs at all of our levels and the controls at all of our levels.
Awesome, man. Thank you ever so much. Really appreciate it. We've run over, so I greatly appreciate your time as always. For those watching along or listening, you can head over to the Services Delivery Alliance website, which is where you can access content like this, but it's also where you can sign up for events like the one that Phil presented at in London, which are both in person and online, where services leaders come together to share their war wounds, I would say, and talk about strategy and execution topics with their peers. Everyone's on sort of the same, let's say, maturity curve in terms of like problems that they're going to face. So it's useful to not reinvent the wheel. Thanks for joining and have a good day.
Thanks for having me. Take care.